Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the penultimate episode of our 3-star Rift Clear series. Today, we will be looking at some of the final rifts in the Omega Rift difficulty. This is a rift that was introduced along with the end of the DLC being added to the game. So, quite some interesting challenges lie ahead of us here. And as you'll see, we've done a little bit of work with some of the other rifts in our previous episodes. Today we will be focusing on the 5 rifts, or actually the 6 rifts that are over on the right-hand side in that hexagon. There is one that's not lit up in the picture on screen, but those are the 6 that we'll be focusing on today, and then the final 7 will be headed your way on Wednesday. So be sure to leave a like on today's video if you find it helpful, informative, and or enjoyable, and as always, don't forget to subscribe for more daily content. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the rifts of today's video. And we are going to be starting out with the level 64 ability trial, where the objective is to defeat Red Skull. Now, this one is an interesting fight, to say the least, as there are a couple of quirks that you really need to keep in mind in order to get the full 3 stars here. The first, of course, is making sure that we clear out the rift in its entirety, or get through the main objective of taking down Red Skull. The third and actually easiest clear condition that's listed here is finishing in 3 minutes and 40 seconds or more, or less, I should say, so faster than 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And the second clear condition, which I did skip over a little bit, is probably the most difficult of the clear conditions to work on, as it entails defeating 60 enemies. And at face value, there actually aren't 60 enemies for us to take out. We can get to about 40 or 45 here in the front section of this rift, and then we'll talk about the additional characters that you'll need in order to get that 60-person clear as we continue in on it. The only other quirk with this is, since it is an ability trial, your abilities and synergies will deal more damage, but everything else will have reduced damage, and we have an increased energy point recovery rate from dealing standard damage to our opponents. So attacks like Wolverine's Adamantium Uppercut and then Falling Aerial Attack does tend to do quite well with replenishing the extreme attack, or the energy points, which we would then use for the synergies for our team. And you'll see here that I'm employing the use of Thanos' Gravity Surge just to kind of keep all of the opponents we're facing off against in the same general local position, and that tends to work out pretty well for us. You'll see that we layer into them a couple more times with our other characters on the team just to make sure that we get through them and take them down. And since my team is at a fairly high level, we end up chewing through these opponents very quickly, all things considered. And as you'll see as we finish out these last 2 opponents here, we will then be administered into the throne room here in Asgard, where we have the final confrontation against Red Skull. And it is just the Red Skull portion of the fight. You do not have to confront the Destroyer armor, though that would probably help in regards to our clear conditions. So as I mentioned earlier, the objective here is defeating 60 enemies. So if you have focused on taking out each and every one of the opponents in our path up until this point, you'll probably be up at the 40 or 45 degree level. You'll want to take Red Skull down to initiate the second phase of the fight, at least initially, and then you do see that there are a couple of Viking warriors that spawn in, and you'll want to try to single them out from Red Skull to assure that you're not dealing excessive amounts of damage to him. I don't end up getting the 60 persons defeated in this run because I was focusing on getting through it, but basically you'll just want to rinse and repeat, isolating the Viking warriors here and taking them down until you've met that 60 cap. And if you are doing it correctly, then you will notice, or if you want to gauge where you're doing it, you can hit the pause menu and then press Y to view your progress on hitting those clear conditions. The second rift that we're looking at today is the level 65 Extreme Trial, where we need to defeat the Black Order. Not all members of the Black Order are present during this fight or this exchange. but it goes pretty easily. The basic gist of this fight is you have reduced damage on every attack except your extreme attacks, and your extreme attacks will replenish at an increased rate, which tends to do pretty well for us, all things considered. Ebony Maw is first up, and he has this phase where he is basically intangible to all damage, and he actually has a secondary phase that will activate, unfortunately, right as we're in the middle of this, where he is less susceptible to damage, though we do still end up dealing a decent amount to him as we finish out. If he would have been down on the ground or not gone into that animation, we definitely would have had him down. And then for here, I do just end up detonating my extreme attack for one of my characters in order to conserve the extreme gauges for the next fights, as there are multiple bosses that we need to take out here. The other clear conditions we need to keep an eye out on, apart from getting the clear or meeting the clear condition for the fight in general, is we need to finish this fight in 7 minutes or less. And the second opponent that we will need to face off against here is Supergiant. And because I have my extreme attacks on standby, we do get her down to her second phase, or practically to her second phase, just with that initial detonation of our extreme attacks there, which tends to do pretty well for us. The only other clear condition you want to keep in mind is you need to get through this fight with having no teammates incapacitated, and that is more easily accomplished if you have taken my advice in maxing out or focusing on the vitality section of the skill tree, as that will heal up members of your team based off of the attack damage that they deal with their extreme attacks as well. I did hope to get Supergiant taken out with just these 2 additional detonations of the extreme attacks there. That unfortunately was not the case, and we do come pretty close with that detonation there, but there's still some more work that needs to happen in order to assure that we take her out. We go ahead and layer into her a bit more with our abilities and heavy attacks in order to get her down to that last stagger area. And unfortunately, I was unable to detonate my extreme attacks in a way that would actually take her down efficiently, though hopefully this attack from Dr. Doom will just about do it, and we actually have to detonate 1 additional extreme attack. But again, if you do miss, it's not the end of the world. There is some room for margin of error here. And if I had detonated my extreme attack from Black Panther there in the correct direction, we would have easily had Supergiant defeated and been able to move along into the next phase here. Which there is one final fight that we need to do in this particular rift, and that is going to be the confrontation against Cull Obsidian, which is going to be on the other side of this elevator that we're working with here. So let's make our way up to that arena and confront him directly. Now, I do detonate my extreme attack right off the top of this fight, mainly because I'm looking to stagger out Cull Obsidian and regain a bunch of my attack power here. And I was hoping to get him down to his secondary phase. We did end up getting our other extreme attacks recharged, and now he is into his second phase, which will be initiated with a minor cutscene right here. And one thing that you do want to keep in mind, especially with Thanos Infinite, is his ability or his extreme attack will initially stagger out some of your enemies, but there is a bit of a cooldown on when they can be staggered again with that extreme attack. So don't be too eager to launch it fully, though it will always maximize the stun damage and pause the stun duration of the opponents as you detonate that attack while they are in that staggered animation there. We go ahead and reapply our strategy of knocking into Cull Obsidian and taking him down to his stagger gauge, and with one final detonation of our extreme gauges here, we should be able to fully take him down. And that is actually the trial clear. I was expecting to face off against more members of the Black Orders, that's what the title of the rift entailed, but indeed that was not the case. The next rift that we will be looking at in today's video is the level 68 boost rift, where we will be defeating Doctor Strange And this has the quirk of all of your attacks dealing a boosted amount of damage. Now, there is an area that I neglected to do right off the bat here, and I had to double back. But one of the clear conditions here is defeating all enemies, and you've seen a good scope of the different enemies that we needed, but over that platform you just saw us run over the top of, or underneath, there is a pit that you'll need to fall down into, and then warp back towards the beginning of the map, because there is one additional enemy that's hanging out at the top of that last section, and you need to defeat all enemies in order to get the clear condition for this fight, or at least get that second star. The second, or the third and final area which we need to be concerned about is defeating this rift in 3 minutes or less. And the positive thing about this is you can run the rift multiple times. You don't have to get the clear condition in each individual run of our gauntlet here. And Doctor Strange does actually have the fight where we will first confront him in his base vanilla form, and then we will need to fight into him again once he has been possessed by Dormammu or imbued with power from Dormammu, which looks a little bit weird in this transition because it's basically the same attack stance opening that he did before, just now with a couple of additional auras, which proves to look a little bit odd and perplexing as we seek to take him on. We will layer into him with a couple of our abilities, and that will be enough to do Doctor Strange, and this one actually goes through relatively quickly. Just keep in mind that there will be some doubling back in order to find all of the enemies that you need to defeat in order to get the full 3 stars here. The fourth rift that we will be looking at today is the Boss Wave Rift. This is a level 69 rift where we need to defeat Mysterio, Doctor Strange, and Ebony Maw, and we do have, you know, the upper hand of having some teammates that deal major amounts of damage. There are a couple of additional enemies that spawn in periodically throughout this fight, but you don't need to focus on them too heavily. You may want to make sure that you take a couple of the larger, mightier enemies out, specifically these elemental mindless ones that are running around, because we do need to score or reach a score of 220,000 or more and finish within a 5-minute area, but that's really pretty simple when it all comes down to it. Doctor Strange has been summoned in now at this stage, and as we layer into him with a couple more of our attacks, we will be able to defeat him pretty handily, just due to the fact that it is the base form Doctor Strange. It is not the Doctor Strange with the Dormammu imbuement. And just like that, with that adamantium uppercut from Wolverine, we have him taken out as well. Ebony Maw is going to spawn in next, and he spawns in right about the same time that I have all of my extreme attacks online, so we're just going to go ahead and detonate all 4 of those and drop them right on top of Ebony's noggin, and that does pretty well for us. And that's really all we needed to focus on for that section of the fight, to be honest. We can now move forward to look at the level 70 Wave Rift. This is very, very straightforward, and I employ a tactic that you've seen me do in our Running the Gauntlet series, where I will use Thanos' Gravity Surge to pull the grunt enemies into the center. There are a couple of mini-bosses that pop in that will give you some additional tools that you can use to then defeat or layer into these opponents here. But all things considered, it's a very straightforward rift. You've got to get through it once in order to get that first star, and then if you can get through the fight with 1 or fewer teammate incapacitations, you'll pick up the second star, and then defeating the 200 enemies within the 4 minute and 40 seconds allotted for this fight, you'll actually be able to do very well in terms of finishing out the opponent threshold that's needed here. We'll use our Gravity Surge one more time to get a bunch of these opponents into the center of the room, and we're now at a stage where all of our extreme attacks are online, so we might wait for a couple of additional enemies to come into the center before we just go ahead and unleash all of our extreme attacks to really rack up the teammates being defeated in this area, or the opponents being defeated in this portion of the rift. With 1 more Gravity Surge, we'll pull in a fair number of opponents to the center, and that gauge is climbing. With 1 more dash attack here, or a set of heavy attacks from Thanos Infinite, we have those opponents defeated, and that works very well for us. The last rift that we will be looking at in today's video is the level 72 Ultimate Rift entitled Black Sheep Battle. And this will involve a couple of the outcasts, or the character outcasts that are found within this area or this game as opponents that we'll need to take on and defeat. Starts off with Maximus. There are a couple of versions of a Loki that pop into this fight as well. And there's a lot of grunts that go on around here also. Really, it's just a very busy fight because there's a lot of particle effects going around, a lot of auras that you'll need to keep in mind. And Maximus tends to be particularly annoying with a lot of the attacks that he throws out, though he is the one that kind of manages the flow and pace of the battle. You can choose to focus on taking out the versions or the two different Loki bosses that are here as well. As soon as we have Loki, or both of the Lokis running around defeated, we can turn our attention back to Maximus, and by getting Maximus down to his third and final phase, we will trigger the spawning of a couple of additional mini-bosses here. We'll actually see that more directly once we have Loki taken down as well. And at this stage, we do go ahead and detonate a couple of our extreme attacks just to take out Loki and Maximus up here. And that's actually going to do it for us, as there are no additional mini-bosses in this particular portion of the fight. We've got to get through this fight with one or fewer teammate incapacitations, as well as clear it out in 3 minutes and 40 seconds or less. But that is very manageable as long as you're bringing in a strong enough team to this fight and this rift. And that is going to do it for the rifts of today's video. Again, if you found this video helpful and or enjoyable, please feel free to leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe for more daily content. We'll be back tomorrow with the next episode in our Marvel Avengers for PlayStation 4 playthrough, and then back Wednesday to finish out the 3-star rifts in the Omega difficulty. So thanks again for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.